Binding of drugs to plasma proteins can affect the efficiency of drugs. The relationship that you ought to remember here is less bound a drug is, the more efficiently it can pass through the cell membranes or diffuse. Regarding plasma protein binding, you must clear the concept that when the drugs appear in the circulation, a fraction of drug molecules bind with plasma proteins, mostly albumin, and another fraction remains as free. Free drug undergo distribution and is responsible for the pharmacological response. The bound drug remains as a reservoir of drug. When concentration of drug at the site of action decreases, the drug dissociates from proteins and is distributed to the target tissue. Drugs with more plasma protein binding have less volume of distribution and vice versa. Examples include warfarin. Protein binding of warfarin is more than 95%. Consequently, the volume of distribution is exceptionally low. Other drugs with high protein binding are furosemide, thyroxine, and clofebrate. Now, drugs can either bind to albumin or alpha acid glycoprotein. These are the commonest plasma proteins for drug binding. Then we have binding with blood cells, which is also resulting in a decreased volume of distribution, such as hemoglobin binds with drugs such as phenytoin and phenobarbital. Carbonic anhydrase binds with acetozolamide. Cell membrane of RBCs binds with imipramine. Drugs can also bind with the tissue and extravascular components like liver, skin, etc. Some of the factors increase this binding. For example, the factors which determine hepatic clearance, including genetic, for example, enzyme activity and polymorphisms. Physiological, for example, hepatic blood flow, transport into and out of the hepatocytes. Environmental factors, for example, smoking and other drugs. And physicochemical factors, for example, protein binding. Take the example of some drugs like paracetamol, chloroquine, and digoxin that binds with liver. Chloroquine binds with skin, ephedrine and atropine binds with eye. Tetracycline and phenytoin have an affinity for bones and teeth. DDT, thiopental, and minocycline are more likely to accumulate in fat. Digoxin and amethine accumulate in the skeletal muscles and heart. Brain is accommodating acetozolamide and chloropromazine. Kidneys and the vestibular apparatus attracts gentamicin. So these are some of the relationships that you have to remember. Some miscellaneous factors also affect this tissue binding. Let's study them with a mnemonic OPD to remember them easily. The O stands for obesity. In obese persons, high adipose tissue content can take up a large fraction of lipophilic drugs. The P for pregnancy. During pregnancy, the growth of the uterus, placenta, and fetus increases the volume available for the distribution of drugs. D for diseased states. Altered albumin or drug-binding protein concentration, altered or reduced perfusion to organs and tissues. Altered tissue pH levels can also affect the volume of distribution. I hope this concept is clear now. Let's move to the next section to study the volume of distribution.